So Charlie, I know you wanted to talk about the Paul Graham essay, but I want to talk
I
about
did.
something else. Do you like that as
I,
an opening?
yeah, I do. I mean, I took all these notes and I printed 25 pages and I read them, but yeah, go
I'm
right, go right ahead.
I'm sure we'll get back to it, but I just got to tell you about something.
Okay.
So I know you're not interested in jiu-jitsu, but bear with me. There's a guy who just won a major competition who I'm just now obsessed with, a phenom. He is he's in his early 20s,
Hmm.
which is like, look, it seems like no big deal, right? There are lots of world-class athletes in their early 20s, but he also started not that long ago. He only started taking jiu-jitsu seriously during COVID.
Yeah.
And it's like, I personally have been training longer than that and made have almost no progress since COVID. Like basically,
Are you offended by his progress or are you,
no,
yeah,
I'm
okay.
amazed, and I think we have something to learn from it.
Okay.
Uh, like you talk to anyone who does jujitsu, and they're like, yeah, I haven't really made any progress since COVID. This guy basically started training seriously around COVID
Hmm.
as a kid. He was like, school was off or something, but
Yeah.
I was still allowed to train, and so that's when I got good. Anyway, he's like one of the best in his world in his weight class now, which is the most competitive weight class.
Yep.
Just like outrageous. His name is Joseph Chen. uh he has had coaches, and like, he trains with good people now, but unlike almost anyone, he has mostly gotten good by watching DVDs. My like,
I thought you were going to say TikTok clips, but no, it's DVDs.
I
Okay.
mean, it's like the
The
more
long
refined
form of,
way of
yeah.
TikTok clips, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like, look, the conventional way to get good at jiu-jitsu is you train with a coach in a structured way in a
Mhm.
class that someone else has put together for you, and you like you give your you get guidance from the coach, or like the mentor or something, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the someone provides structure for you. And from the very beginning, Joseph has just been like, I'm going to take this into my own hands because I don't necessarily have a great coach around. I mean, again, he has had some help from other people, but mostly, even when he's going to a class, he's not doing the technique. He's just drilling his own thing. And the structure that he's getting from that is from DVD. It just like seems like an outrageous thing. Like you couldn't possibly do that. And by doing that, like the guys he is beating, Charlie,
Yeah.
should be way better than him. They've been training longer. They've won major competitions before, and like they're the guys. And he's just showing up with his stuff that is like watched on TikTok, etc. And and the thing is, obviously I'm obsessed with him
Are
now.
you obviously are trying to buy these DVDs, right? I'm sure they're all sold out on
Well,
Amazon.
it's the same. I've seen some of the DVDs. I've seen some
Yeah.
of the DVDs as well. So it's not like watching the DVD is the magic thing. It's like his approach to training is just far more effective
Mm.
than than other people who are also trying to be incredibly intentional about their training.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like everyone's just like he's the first person to try. Like everyone's trying, but he's had this outrageous success. And he's done a couple of podcasts and stuff, which is why I'm trying to like figure
Yeah.
out what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's just he's so much more intentional about every little interaction is the interesting thing for me. It's like, basically, no one who goes into train, rounded to the closest percentage, 0% of people, maybe a couple of percent of people, when they go into train, are intentional about what they're training. Most people are like, I'll show up, see what happens, have some fun,
Mhm.
exercise, whatever. And some subset of people are like, I'll show up, and my goal today is to hit as many of these types of chokes as I can with this kind of resistance, and I'll keep count,
Yeah.
and tomorrow I'll try and do more. So that's like a small subset of people. But he goes in being like, I'm going to try this specific thing, and I'm going to tell my training partner what I'm trying to do. And if I get too much resistance or too little resistance, I'm going to adjust their feedback to me so
Mm.
that I get like the best possible training environment to try and figure this thing out. Anyway, I haven't totally cracked the
Okay.
puzzle of what he's doing, but
I'm imagining, and it's probably not the case, but I feel like this person is also must be superstitious. Like they have to come in and they practice exactly the same way. They've got their favorite mug, favorite headband. Um, But maybe that's me just projecting onto this superstition on top of this intentionality. It doesn't have to be there, but that's what I'd like to think.
No, I don't think he has magic underwear or anything. I
Okay.
think it's like all magic DVDs. Like I just think
Yeah.
that he's figured out a process. And maybe there's a selection effect, right? It's like if someone succeeds in just ridiculous circumstances, you're like you go and figure out how they did it. And obviously, some people are going to do similarly ridiculous things and not succeed.
Yeah.
But so there, I'm not saying there's no selection effect, but for him at least, like the main thing that I was telling my wife this story, and also someone who's bored of hearing about jiu-jitsu. And she's like, okay, so what are you gonna? That's a cool story.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? And for me
We
personally,
got to buy a DVD player on eBay.
you gotta buy a DVD player.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like I watch instructionals. I feel like I study
Can I
jiu-jitsu.
just to jump in? When you're watching something like this, do you have to be in front of a mirror and practicing stuff, or are you writing notes? How can you translate what's going to be likely hours away from consumption time to actually putting it into practice? And are you recording yourself as well?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like in jiu-jitsu, there's a big industry of these instructionals. We call them DVDs, but really there's like there are platforms for people providing this kind of video, and a lot of people buy them and watch them. But obviously you need to be very active in putting that into practice. And to me, like my approach to getting better at software or jiu-jitsu or whatever it is that we're talking about is about the feedback loop. And so I feel like some affinity for Joseph there. It's like it's not about the notes that you take. It's not about what you put into your Anki cards, although that is a kind of feedback loop in itself. For me, it's like I'm watching that, and even if the instructor is not providing a drill for that, I'm thinking, what is the drill that I could have for that? Or what is the kind of, even like the game? It's like, what are both sides of this technique where I want to get good at X, but that means my training partner needs to get good at Y, the opposite of X, so that I can get good resistance to X as I'm training that. And so like, what is the kind of scenario that I can set up with a training partner such that they're trying to do this to me and I'm trying to do that to them? And like, that's how I could get good feedback on this technique. So it is taking notes, but it's more like, how can I use this to set an objective?
Yep.
How can I use this? Like, what would the next objective be? Or how can I make a sequence of objectives, a sequence of games? So that's I think what he's doing, and I'm not doing it as well as he is, by evidence by the fact that he is a world-class athlete in a much shorter period of time than the rest of us.
I also, in my fantastical brain here, I'm also imagining that I don't know where Joseph's from, but it'd be cool if he unlocks some secret to intentionality, and then there's this ripple effect that all the people around him have sort of figured it out, and then it sort of like ripples out from there that everyone's become intentional, or he's the only one in his gym that seems to have figured this out. Do you get a sense for whether or not there's a community of adherents that are subscribing to this, or is it too hard to actually put into practice?
So I don't know that much about Joseph. I know that he kind of picked it up off other people, as well. Like he didn't totally originate this idea that he's going to like figure out his training environment perfectly. But he's a kind of vagabond and will train at lots of different gyms and stuff. So I'm not sure like how much effect he has on other people. But there's another guy who's interesting in this context as well. Again, jiu-jitsu is fascinating for this. I'm sure there are other sports as well, and like hopefully people will leave comments and tell me to go and study up on this other freak athlete. But it's like there's this guy Mikey Musumeci who's he's the best ever American Brazilian jiu-jitsu athlete. A weird thing to say, but like if you look at the traditional Brazilian kind of jiu-jitsu, where you wear the pajamas and stuff, he as a non-Brazilian has done better than anybody else in the world. He's won like 4 world titles or something. He is, I like there's speculation online about whether he's autistic or not. But he's basically like a caricature of someone who is obsessively nerdy about something.
Yeah.
How many physical sports would you expect to have someone who's like stereotypically obsessively nerdy about something to win? It's like, imagine basketball and the guy, the like LeBron James or whatever, he's like just in the books all the time, and that's how he gets good, and he's
Yeah.
like scrawny and stuff. That's Mikey Musumeci. Like, it's not like he's not fit, but he's not winning based on being more athletic and stronger, and like he doesn't. I mean, he doesn't take drugs. Like, basically, absolutely everyone else at that level is on performance enhancing drugs, and this guy is hitting the books. Anyway, another like outrageous story because he's basically nerded his way. Is that a verb?
Yeah.
Any
Let's make it a
maybe
verb.
verb?
So, Oz,
Uh,
why is it important that you're hitting the books versus just finding a coach? Is it that books, DVDs allows you to have this theoretical world-class education, the best teachers from everywhere in the world? Is it that you're getting the amalgamation of all the knowledge? Like, why couldn't you just pair up with Aristotle? And
That's why this is so fascinating for me, and like why I feel like we can talk about this on a podcast about computer science education.
yeah,
Because if you just happen to be Alexander the Great, then Aristotle is at your disposal.
yeah,
Everyone other than Aristotle, plus or minus a handful of others, did not have Aristotle. Sorry,
yeah,
everyone other than Alexander the Great did not have Aristotle, and like, Aristotle also happened to have Plato, and Plato happened to have Socrates, and there was like a small group of people in each case.
yeah,
If you look at that now and you say like, how do I get access to the absolute best person to teach me this, who is not only world class but able to convey how they became world class in a way that makes sense to me, and like, how can I convince them to spend their time on me? It's like, it used to be the case that a lot of the people who are very good at things like science actually were not very employable, and so you could actually pay them like the equivalent of today's 200 grand or something
yeah,
to be the tutor for your kid, and that would make sense for them, and they would do that for 3-4 hours a day and then do their science, and like that was a reasonable proposition. You cannot do that with a world-class anybody anymore. Maybe thankfully for them, they're much more employable. So
yeah.
long story short, our access to the best people is highly limited. Excuse me. And even if it were not, it's like, even if your access weren't limited, Charlie, like everyone else's access is. Like,
Oh,
of the
mine's
billions of
limited,
people,
but yeah, I get your point.
right? Like, even if the people who, it's interesting, even the billionaires aren't doing this. They're not like hiring world class scientists or whatever to tutor their kids, or maybe they are in like little pockets, but it's
Yeah,
not. That kind of phenomenon has really declined. Like, they'll send their kids to private school, but the private school is not that much better, let's be honest, than the
yeah,
other schools in the area. It's more of a kind of status thing. Um, but like, even if that could happen for some people, it's not happening for most people. And the crazy thing about Mikey Musumeci uh, and Joseph Chan, they're just getting stuff that's available online,
hmm,
and by applying themselves in a way that's more effective than others, they're beating the people who have access to the best coaches in the world
yeah.
for a few years, and then that's how they get access, to some of the best coaches in the world. But by then, like, they've got what's important, which is like a mentality towards training, like an approach to their practice that's way more effective than what the coach can tell them. So
Well,
that's
yeah, we
just
now
the
have,
story of Mikey Musumeci. He got good in his garage, and
yeah,
you're asking about like what effect do these people have on other people as well. Mikey Musumeci now only trains with hobbyists, and he's spoken about this. He does not train with professional athletes. He feels like the vibe is off, he
yeah,
says.
yeah,
Like, he could train with the best in the world. I mean, he is the best in the world, but he could train with other like best in the world. But instead, he's taken people who are not that good, like who were kind of entry level, hobbyists only, in his garage, and he has brought their level up to now they're pretty good for hobbyists, and that's his preferred training environment.
Well, I'm sure it's a sick garage at this point.
It's it's probably very well equipped.
But yeah, so I'm thinking about
Systems
the
are- Sorry.
MOOC Revolution, Khan Academy, all this stuff, all the content's there now. So you have access theoretically to all this world-class education, which is great. And that's fantastic that the internet's brought that, but it's very clear, in your downtime, are you actually consuming this? And not even are you consuming it, are you actively consuming it with intention, with consistency? That seems
Well,
to be the
that's the
key to all
thing.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, the MOOCs solved the information asymmetry problem, and it's exactly the same with jiu-jitsu DVDs. It's like before the information was locked up, and now it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, but the critical thing about education is not necessarily that the information needs to be available to you. I mean, that's a major thing as well. Before the printing press and so on, it would have been impossible for basically everybody.
Yeah.
But a very good teacher is able to ask you questions, probing questions that force your understanding to progress forward. And without access to that, you need to come up with your own feedback loops. You need to come up with your own way of being confronted with problems and progressing from there. And these guys have done that just phenomenally well. And something that, again, it's a sport. It's a physical thing. You should expect that you need really good training partners rather than hobbyists or whatever. You should expect that you couldn't have this information conveyed compared to software where you could perfectly convey all the information on the screen.
Yeah.
It's like the DVDs are you'd think that it's not nearly as good as having someone physically move your body and show you how to do something. Yet that's what it took for these guys.
Is that discipline and focus something that you've seen people be able to teach themselves in a meaningful way? Because we've talked to some Richies and so many other of your students who've gone on into the depths, into the frontiers in the Paul Graham essay. And part of me thinks they had that innately in them. They already were doing that. They already had that curiosity. They already had that desire to peel things back and just explore these things. So that's great. But have you seen people who've been more laissez-faire about their approach to learning, be able to flip a switch after hearing an example like this?
No, yeah,
No.
no. That's the interesting way that it comes back to the Paul Graham essay.
Yeah.
Where I find it interesting that he leads with and emphasizes the exploratory part of the problem. It's like find the problem. If you want to do world-class work, find the problem that you are suited to and that you get excited about. I'm sure he wouldn't be happy with that summary.
Yeah.
But I I do think there are lots of failure modes. There are very few people who get to be world class, and one of them is that most of us don't, until we're almost too late in many cases, have enough of an opportunity to explore a wide enough array of fields that we find the one that excites us to the extent that jiu-jitsu excited Joseph Chen.
Yeah.
So that's a major thing, and I think that's a good part of the essay to emphasize. And reading that, I'm like, yeah, this, as a homeschool parent, it's a good reminder to get my kids exposed as early as possible to as many different fields as possible, so they don't have I don't know about your school experience, but during school we had basically no idea of what any profession was other than our parents.
I knew there were doctors, lawyers, and I thought if you went into business, you owned a McDonald's or something. That's literally all I knew that you could be. Those three things.
Yeah,
I heard about astronauts.
We had lawyers, doctors, and bankers. Although no one knew what a banker was, we assumed that it had something to do with retail banking.
Yeah, the pneumatic tubes, which seemed cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Simpsons education of what banking involves.
Yeah, well, I learned.
And there was a kind of work experience thing, but that was it was 2 weeks, and you just got whatever you could, whatever your friend's dad or whatever was doing.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't real exposure. So setting up an environment where you get real exposure to a lot of different professions, get to work in that context a little bit from a young age, I think that's huge. But yeah, so there's the kind of exploration problem. But then when it comes to software, and this is something that we were talking about with Richie, right? I feel like one of the failure modes is people assume that there are certain aspects of software that could lead to something important, major, valuable, And the reality is that everything could lead to something important, major, valuable.
Mhm.
And taking the option, pursuing the path that you're most excited about is probably going to work out. Like
Yeah.
the thing that you want to do on the weekend is probably going to work out. If it's in software, it's still going to be lucrative enough. It's still going to be valuable enough. And pulling that thread, I think. So all that's to say, like, yes, uh, we find ourselves based on whatever our biology, our upbringing, our environment at that point in time. Some of us more inclined towards one thing and some towards another. But yeah, giving yourselves options, allowing yourself to pursue the thing that's exciting, I think is something. But then the Joseph Chen story is like, well, okay, all competitive athletes in this sport are excited about the sport,
Mhm.
right? They all want to be good at this sport. They have found their thing. Then you're not going to be professional if you're like forcing yourself to do it, right? Like anyone who's gotten to past that threshold of being a pro is was excited about it as a kid, and they missed the time. They did all the things in the Paul Graham essay. Okay, but he's world class in a few years and like beating everybody. How is he doing that? That comes down to what is his training environment? Like, what is his approach to training? So there's something there as well that's just absent, I feel like, from the Paul Graham essay. Like, it's not just a matter of identifying, okay, I'm pretty good at numerical stuff, and I've explored this area of mathematics, and like I get excited about it, and I want to work on it, and so I should like, follow the Paul Graham essay of how I find a subset of this that's going to be exciting.
Mhm.
No, there's a mechanical aspect as well of like every single day, how do I get better at this? What does my work look like? And maybe that depends from one field to another. Like it differs from one field to another. But
Yeah,
that's what I find.
here's where I get hung up sometimes on this sort of thing, where I think you're right. There's a mechanical thing, uh, and then I go down. Okay, what tools do I need? What Anki decks do I need? What should I need to wake up and gratitude meditate or whatever? So there's like this element of like, yes, you're supposed to do some of the things, but you're not supposed to. It's not about the tools, even though the tools can be effective. But I just get lost in the tools, I think, and it's not. And maybe Paul Graham ignores this because it's not really about the mechanical pieces of what you're supposed to do. And I think there's like a spirit. He talks a lot about curiosity, and that spiritual side to this quest, I think, is the thing he's trying to tell you it's okay to do. But you're right. There's something mechanically different between what Joseph's doing and other people are doing, but maybe that's not the focus area, or maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. But I
Yeah, I
always
mean,
feel
it's
like
not
yeah.
mechanical. Like, it's not in terms of like, how is he taking his notes or whatever. It's not mechanical. Like, what is his physical training environment like? How are the gym mats? But there is like a day-to-day process that he has that other people don't have.
So
And
I think it's mechanical in that you complete the loop, you complete the feedback loop, the REPL loop, much faster and much tighter for him, and he knows exactly what he's testing, and he knows what the next thing to do is. Whereas the probably average person going in has some idea about what they want to get better at, but they don't really know exactly what they're testing coming in. They're allowing someone else to sort of set that direction for them, expecting their teacher or coach to give them that feedback. Yeah, and I feel like that's what I do that in so many things, and maybe it's because I have a lot of interests, and I think I derive. We've talked about entertainment value. I think I derive a lot of entertainment value out of these things, and I have not been hyper focused on exploring the frontier. I want to get better, but I don't know that. Yeah, I read all this. I get so upset sometimes reading this, or not upset, self conscious, where am I being, there's that term for people who want to be entrepreneurs, wantrepreneurs. I'm like a wantra, do great work type person, where it's like, oh, I love reading about doing great work. But I'm not actually doing the great work, or I'm not sitting down. But it feels so good to be reading about doing great work. So maybe that's enough for me. And I don't think it
maybe
is, but
that's the
maybe it is.
niche.
I don't know.
You become the expert, you write the book.
I
Yeah,
hope.
I mean, it is kind of funny, like to look at this kind of thing and talk about people who just dedicate their entire lives to something.
Yeah.
And you and I, Charlie, I mean, not dedicating our entire lives to any one thing. That's just not,
Yeah.
we're not going to do that. The like that ship has sailed. we've got families and we've got other interests, and we're making the decision to not invest everything in becoming a world-class jiu-jitsu athlete or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, the best possible software engineer. But we can take things from these people and say, well, look, I enjoy getting better at things. Even if I pick up a new hobby tomorrow, like it's fun because from day to day it gets better. Like
Yeah.
you pick up a camera and you want to do photography, you want to do woodworking, whatever. It's like, well, 1 month after you start, what you're doing is better than when you started. Why not? If you're investing the time in this anyway, whether it's all of your waking hours or 2 hours a week, why not use that time well and enjoy the process more by getting better more effectively? Everyone who keeps showing up to jiu-jitsu gets better. Like anyone who keeps doing it for 10 years is going to be pretty good. But just, if you take the Joseph Chen approach, it's not that much harder. It's not that much more stressful. You just kind of need the voice in your head one way or another to be like, is this actually an effective method for improvement
Yeah.
right now, what I'm doing? Or could there be a better drill? Like, could there be a better way of practicing?
I have the perfect example of this in my life where I've been playing guitar since 7th grade. I got the Squire Strat Pack, which was $99. It was like a piece of junk, came with a little piece of junk amp. And I had a guitar teacher who came once a week for like $11 an hour or something, maybe $11 for 2 hours or something. It was absurdly cheap. This guy was an amazing blues guitarist. And I would just basically just sit there and ask him to tell me about his life on the road and all this stuff. And he'd tune my guitar, and then I'd ask him to teach me a Green Day song. And really, I have not gotten much better from that period. And I've been playing, and I brought my guitar to college, and I have it everywhere I go. And now I sort of sing, like I write these little songs for myself, and I have fun with it. And I look at that thing, I was like, oh man, I'd love to be in a band. I'd love to be able to solo a little bit better. And still to this day, I'm like, don't know all my like I don't even know what key most songs are in. I'm sort of just guessing through this. Whereas I met this buddy recently who's become one of my friends, and he wants to jam all the time. And he's only been playing guitar for a year, and he's already talking about like this different voicings of chords, and he loves diminished chords and all this stuff. And he's shredding, and he has taken this hyper disciplined approach. Now he actually has a tool that's been really useful. He has this amp that is connected to his iPad where he can have these lessons, and he can slow down the thing so he can play along with the thing and keep it in. So in this case, the tools have really helped him, but he sits down every night for several hours, headphones on, and gets better. I pick up the guitar and write a song about the mail or like random things around my house. Now, I love what I'm doing with guitar. I want to get a little bit better. I think exploring this and thinking about people who are doing great work, hopefully that can help me get a little bit better. Because what do I really want to do? I want to put on a concert or something like that and just shred and be able to do that. So I'm hoping 25 pages in that I can extract something for that example. And that could be, I don't know, it's just emblematic of how I feel about a lot of things right now. And it's good and bad. I get a lot of feedback. People are like, Charlie, you've got a lot of hobbies. And yet I feel like I'm not good at any single one of them. So it sort of makes me feel weird. I'm like, thank you, but I'm also like, no, don't tell me that, but also tell me it's a weird feeling.
Yeah, in many ways, I think the Paul Graham essay, I think probably also people listening to this are gonna be like, what is this Paul Graham essay that you're talking about? It's the one that he recently wrote that's called How to Do Great Work, July
Yep.
2020. And also the Hamming essay, I feel like the overall theme is like how to choose between all of the different options, like how to decide what to focus on, such that you can ignore the other things. And Charlie's like, I like the other things too, and me too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I like my work, but I also like learning other things. That's just fun. And I like being a dad, and I want to be a good dad,
Yeah.
and all these other things. But I think that within that, you can say, out of my, for you, 10 things, you might as well put all the time that you've budgeted to that, actually get better.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, there are people who let's say you've got 100 hours, like all you get to spend on guitar in your entire life is 100 hours.
Yeah.
Let's just hypothetically. There's a huge degree of variation in those 100 hours. You could get very, very good in 100 hours, or you could fool around in 100 hours. And if you feel like getting very good is going to be fun, like if you'd like to get there, turns out that it's not about like more sacrifice or whatever. There actually are just better ways to approach your practice.
Yeah.
So
And it could be exponential or just grow at some accelerated rate. Like once you hit some threshold where you feel like, oh, I can't do this. And then when you do it, I think things start to flow. And then you find the next hard thing, but then you've proven to yourself that you can go and do that. So I think guitar, I'm going to be focused. I actually told my buddy, Zach, that I want to play a show in his backyard, and we're going to set a date. And that means that we're going to have to practice a little bit more. So that's another thing that I think is a tool. They don't really talk about this, but I always hear this come up, accountability buddies. And I don't know that really I haven't seen accountability buddies really work. Ends up just being like a fun topic for people who are like pseudo interested in this too. But again, it's fun. It's fun to think that an accountability buddy is gonna make it happen, when really the accountability buddy isn't going to be with you at night when you're supposed to pick up the guitar and watch that YouTube video on 0.25 speed.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a little bit of social pressure, but very rarely do you see that like defining people's success. It's like I was in this group scenario situation, and other people were pushing me. Although, I mean, yeah, there is a lot of like value that people get from their peers, at least in terms of like resetting expectations a little bit higher. They're not going to give you motivation that you're lacking, but maybe you're like, oh wow, this person is getting good quickly. Why, that means that I could get good quickly. It's a kind of proof of concept. Or this person is healthy. Like, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people listening have experienced this, where they move into a share house or something where everyone's just healthier, and without thinking about it, you start eating better and exercising more and whatever.
Yeah.
And similarly, you join a team where they're disciplined about performance or something. They're just better software engineers. They're more thoughtful. They do better code review, and their code's more secure and faster. And like you find yourself gravitating that way as well. So that's definitely a thing. But yeah, no one's gonna give you the motivation to practice guitar. What I'm saying though is like Joseph Chan, like everyone else, has the motivation. He's just like is able to go into training and say, hey, I don't want to train this way because it's not the most important thing. I'm going to train this other way. Just set up a better feedback loop.
So have you tried this in your own thing? Have you, in your own practice of jiu-jitsu, have you gone full Joseph Chen?
I've not, but I'm getting better. So things that I've started doing recently, sorry for jiu-jitsu constantly as the example, but it's I find it interesting because we can draw so much from sports, and I think like sports coaching has something to teach us as teachers as well. But so I recently got back from a trip where I was training with people who are way better than me. And that's like, I live somewhere where I've got good training partners, but it's like I'm not going to get better. It's not like moving into a share house where everyone's healthier. I'm not going to naturally get better just by training with my
This is when you had the black eye.
When I had the black eye, yeah. So yeah, I went. It was kind of an intentional trip to train with these people, and I had a big competition afterwards and stuff. And through this process, it was just like a reminder that I could be doing a lot better. And just like the standard was way higher. I was happy that I could like keep up with them a little bit, because some of these guys are training full time. But also it's like, well, they are beating me on things that I can improve on. So that was a kind of motivating experience. And then when I got back home, I started like a little bit of a remote coaching relationship with one of the guys there who is a world-class athlete. And that, because it's remote, it requires video. And so I started recording my training for the first time. And it felt a bit weird because like it's a group training environment and you're a guy with a camcorder and you're like, put it there. And like, do you mind if I record my training? And everyone's joking. It's like, oh, is this to build up your Instagram or whatever? It's like, no, I actually just want to be able to review my performance.
Okay, I was imagining you're doing this in your living room, but you're actually recording at the gym, is what you're saying.
No, yeah, I'm going to the gym, which is supposed to be a good training environment. And like, yeah, I learn stuff whenever I go in there. but for the first time since I've been training jiu-jitsu, I've started recording my training environment so that I can review it afterwards
Yeah.
and identify gaps in my knowledge and send it to this coach so that he can answer questions. And yeah, it's interesting. Like I got to the point where I'm spending like hours editing footage into small enough chunks so
Yeah.
that I can really like distill down what are the problems I'm having, why do I think I'm having them, what should I focus on, sending it to him, and then he'll give me very, very good feedback that's like, no, that's not a problem. Here is a technique, and he'll record like, here's a 5 minute response to how you do this, and he does like voiceover commentary on the video. And it's just like fantastic feedback. But
Wow.
I've only just started doing that.
That's cool. And now you're getting into machine learning to automate extracting these things for you. Have you gone
That's
down that route?
it's not a bad idea. I mean, overall, I think the tooling for this kind of thing could be way better.
Yeah.
And that would open it up to a lot more people.
Yeah.
So just like, like we were saying before, the printing press opened up knowledge to a lot of people. MOOCs opened up knowledge to a lot of people. There's still lots of gaps. Okay, maybe like we could do remote coaching of things if video editing were easier.
Yeah.
That would open things up. There's still going to be a lot of people who don't. Like I said, I had a kind of motivating experience that spurred me to want to do this in the first place. I could have been recording my stuff years ago. Why wasn't I doing that? It's not that it like takes a bunch more time or whatever. It's just like no one else was doing that. It didn't occur to me to do that. I didn't, I didn't feel like doing that, I guess.
Do
I
you
wasn't
think,
going in thinking like, what's the thing that I need to work on, or how can I even identify the mistakes I'm making? I just go and make some mistakes, and maybe organically, like I would try and fix some of them. I
yeah.
wasn't like watching slow-mo, like what happened exactly in this situation, and editing like a supercut of those situations and sending it to a coach and like getting feedback. That's not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the thinking organically that you're going to figure out this path, or expecting a group coach to sort of solve that for you, is just, you have to take matters into your own hands.
Yeah, I mean, you can get, I mean, you will get better. Like
Yeah.
most software engineers get better year to year, right? Probably. Would you say that?
I would hope maybe they get better at navigating the political structure, or they don't, but
Yeah, or even that.
or you
Yeah,
don't.
I don't know. Actually, like if you take someone with 10 years experience, they're almost certainly better than someone with 6 months experience.
Yeah.
Almost certainly better than themselves with 6 months experience, but it's definitely diminishing returns. And then if you look at someone who's like, compare even themselves between 10 and 15 years, not necessarily the case that they got better in that
Yeah.
time. The
Yeah.
software engineers. They
Yeah.
know more technologies,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the technologies that they knew previously have just been redundant or whatever. And so they didn't actually like objectively make progress. They
Yeah,
just kind of
they're
treaded water.
just still in the same stream. It's just new things that are floating alongside them.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
this other junk is floating past them. But yeah, in terms of improving their skills, like are they better at debugging now? Like are they better at system design now? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to make sure we cover. I had asked one of your students in the podcast channel a question about
Okay.
the essay. So this is from someone called Bug Thug, which is a great name. So Bug Thug asked this question. If I can sort of extract what I think they're asking, is it feels like in the startup landscape, people are saying, oh, you should, like, we need to work on the frontier advancing technologies, rockets, robots, AI, and things like that. Whereas a lot of it might be easier to potentially just build your SaaS that is like, this new HR tool allows you to write your reviews better, maybe make your fortunes, and then go off and do that. I'm Bug Thug. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but I feel like that he's basically asking, how much should that matter in someone who's trying to do great work? Is it okay to be pushing towards like an intermediate goal if your long-term goal is something that's like going to put humanity on Mars, or should you just go right off and try to do the Mars thing and see what happens?
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of stuff is kind of circumstantial, but I would say, look, a little bit of financial independence pays off a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it shouldn't be too hard to get there. Like you shouldn't get to the age of 30, 35 and be like, all right, ready to do the thing that I actually wanted to do after 15 years in the industry. But yeah, at the same time, if you've got like you've got no buffer to take risk, then that's going to be very hard as well.
Yeah.
But you may be surprised how little buffer you actually need, and how much risk you can actually take. Again, in software, you're probably going to land on your feet. There are probably people who are going to help you out. Probably anything is going to attract some kind of investment from somewhere.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky in that regard that the risks aren't nearly as risky as if you're trying to do this in music or sports or something. So there's that. But yeah, the overall barbell kind of approach of like, let's build a minimal amount of safety buffer and then use the rest as risk. It's like, don't try and optimize for things that like, there's this kind of culture in software engineering circles that's like, let's optimize our retirement accounts, let's optimize like let's spreadsheet everything, let's invest all this time in like incrementally, getting the highest total compensation or whatever. And if you do this for 10-15 years, then you're financially independent. I feel like that's fine for some, but if Bug Thug's objective is to do great work, then the opposite approach is kind of better. Like, don't do the optimization, don't do the spreadsheeting. Find out what is like the minimal safety buffer that you have.
Yep.
And maybe that's like living somewhere that other people aren't living, or choosing a kind of lifestyle that other people aren't choosing, or whatever. Just realizing that you're going to be fine if you've got a certain amount, and that allows you to take more risk, or realizing that you're fine if you're like, if your total comp doesn't grow at the same velocity as people who go to the big companies or something for 5 years, because you're taking this big moonshot kind of risk, and then you come back and then you join the big company if it doesn't work out. Like, you're on a different trajectory, but that's fine. All that's to say, I think a little bit of buffer makes sense, but you might be surprised how little buffer you really need. How little. Again, in software, it's a kind of fortunate thing.
Well, my closing thought here is this essay is extensive, and it almost to me reads like a series of meditations like Marcus Aurelius. And it's great in that regard, but I feel like it's something just like sifting, and I kind of wish I could just like waft myself in it in the morning, just like get one of those koans thrown at me. So it's probably something I'll return to again and again, which is nice. And I think this sort of essay, like some of Paul's other essays, are the kind of thing where it can just open your eyes to something and say, it's okay to go after this. Maybe you've been thinking about this in your heart, and you want to do this, but you didn't have language. Maybe you haven't seen Hamming's, but this, I'm really happy to have another great essay in this regard. Again, similar to your essay, if I can say about like being consistent, there are these essays that you can read, which I think can help you see through confusion and say, yeah, I do want to go do that. Or I do want to just get better at guitar. So I'm just happy to have another thing in here, even if it's really long. I think that's kind of fun that every time you read it, you'll probably find something a little bit new that you missed.
Yeah, I found that interesting about this one because it didn't speak to me in the way that other essays of his have spoken to me, which maybe it's just like I've already heard a lot of that, or like whatever point I'm at in my life, this is not the message that's like really opening my eyes and energizing me. But that reminded me of how much some of his earlier essays did exactly that for me when I was young.
I mean, the one, How to Do What You Love, I think it was called. Like, those were seminal essays back then. But I think this will be another essay that just opens someone else's eyes, which is really cool. And
yeah, for some people, that's exactly it.
And I love that it's basically highlighting to embrace your childhood and just do weird shit for your childhood, which is like always been my mantra. So I like.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna when I was sorry. It sounds like you got to run, but let me add a couple of things as well.
Yeah.
When I was saying before, I told Catherine about the Joseph Chen story, and she's like, "So what? Like, what does that mean to you?" A lot of this is also just food for thought for me as someone who has kids, and wants this kind of at least the best possible chance for them, where they're not looking back with regret. And I think a really major part of this essay, Paul Graham's essay, there is to say, make the most of your youth. Also, he points out, make the most of being old and wise and whatever, if that's the case, that the situation that you're in. But yeah, expose yourself as much as possible to opportunities to understand what different areas you could work in and what might be interesting to you and what you might have an aptitude for. So that's fantastic. And like, you don't need to be a homeschool parent to do that. Like, you just need to remember that your kid or yourself, you know, if you're still in this period of your life, should have more exposure to things. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I just took away, no one's going to tell you what to do. No one's going to tell you what your calling is. And it's like, maybe homeschooling allows for more exploration, but if you're on I always imagine it like a railroad track, and you're on this track, you're going to this school, then this school, then this job, then this job. And before you know it, you're in your grave. And that's the process. That's the teaching of the mean that gets the economy going. But an essay like this says, if you're not careful, you probably, if you found this essay, you probably have been searching. It's almost like Matrix stuff. Like, it's okay. You can, there are other ways out there. There are other roads.
Yeah. I think that's the most important takeaway from this. It's like, you are responsible for giving yourself an opportunity to find what you're going to be good at. But then the Joseph Chan thing is, as soon as you know what that is, as soon as that's clear, find the best possible way to become excellent at that one day after another. And that could be as simple as like, who are the world-class people here and how did they get good? Or who are the surprising stories, right? Like, who's the scrawny guy who's still the world champion? The one guy not on drugs is still a world champion. Or the person who got good very quickly or in surprising circumstances. We have so much to learn from those people. Even if it's just like, what is the wiki of the subreddit of the people who are really interested in this? Like, what's their distilled knowledge of what's like an effective way of learning this? Or like, who are the people who like, what are the resources, or who are the teachers, or what are the courses for the people who've gotten very good at this in a surprising amount of time or in surprising circumstances? That knowledge is there, and there's this like just meta learning, like figuring out, you know, the learning how to learn thing. I don't think you can generically talk about this across all possible domains. And there are people who disagree with me, and obviously there's a learning how to learn course, but like, once you decide that your thing is going to be knitting or whatever, once you've like done the Paul Graham exploration and found it, just like take the moment to try and figure out, how do I learn how to learn to get better at knitting? How do I learn how to learn to get better at jiu-jitsu?
Can you just clarify why you think learning how to learn isn't something that is translatable?
I think it's too vague. When you find the intersection of jiu-jitsu and software engineering and all these other things, like the intersection of all of the things you might want to get good at, I think there's either like nothing in it, or you need to speak very vaguely in order to get value. Whereas when you say, hey, I want to get really good at guitar, someone can tell you, hey, my friend has only been doing this for a year and they have this tool that helped them a lot. Might not help you, I don't know, but this is what worked for them, or this is their practice technique or whatever. Now you can get specific about that. Now, sure, there are general things, like that's what this podcast episode is about being intentional. But I can't then just say to you, hey, Charlie, no matter what it is that you're doing, you want to get good at painting. And so like, what you need to do is be thoughtful about the process of getting good at painting. Like, what sticks from there? It's going to be more valuable to am I contradicting myself here?
Are you contradicting yourself with your
generally, aren't I?
Yeah, and then also your consistency essay. So maybe you're saying there isn't a formula for this, but there are these habits that are associated with it that could help. Because to me, the consistency thing that does feel translatable to any discipline.
I think ultimately I'm saying, once you know the discipline, then like, I am no longer going to be able to give you the tools to get better at that discipline, but you should find the people who are, and you should be thoughtful about your own process, take that into your own hands. And ultimately it is possible. Like that, again, coming back to what I told my wife, when she asked me, it's like, well, when our kids figure out what they want to do, which we'll do our best to expose them to lots of things. We'll say they're 13 and they're like, I'm going to be a marine biologist or whatever. And it's clear that that's what's going to happen if they have the opportunities, then we're going to hit it hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like, all right, how can we be a world-class marine biologist by the age of 18? Because that's possible. You don't need to take 20 years for it. There are people who get much better, much faster
Yeah.
than others. And we'll just do this. Like, again, do you need to like run immediately?
No,
Because I
no, no,
got
it's
some.
cool. I mean, I want to be a marine biologist, so I want to hear how you're going to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will figure that out. I've got no
Okay.
idea about
Okay.
marine biology, but that's maybe the track that we're going to be on.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the like there are lots of really bad homeschooling experiences that people have, and so whenever I find an example of someone who succeeded in that environment, I'm like, yeah, I got to learn everything about this person.
Yeah.
And one that my wife and I are drawn to a lot is this someone called Laura Deming. Have you encountered her?
I think I've seen her on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, so she is she's like at this point an investor,
Yeah.
and is like the primary investor in life extension
Yeah.
companies. And but she basically, her story is she was homeschooled and basically got to like a world-class understanding of this area of biology as a teenager, and went to work in a lab as a teenager. I can't remember what age it was. Like she would not have finished high school. Like she'd done, had she been in high
Yeah.
school, she was homeschooled, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
there's a kind of no speed limits aspect to this. Also, great motivating article. Speaking of that, I don't know if
I
you've
don't think I haven't read that.
yeah, I'll post that in the show notes as well. Or send
Okay.
it through to you. Another great example of just like opening people's minds up to what is possible. The titles that literally like there are no speed limits. But yeah, Laura like basically learns all of high school, everything that you would learn in high school by 12 or 13, like
Yeah.
the age that she would have been starting high school, just because no one told her not to, and she was in an environment where that was supported. And then yeah, so by the time that she was like uh an age where she was being accepted as, I think the story she tells is like she went to this person saying like, can I come and mop the floors in your lab? And that lady was like, don't be ridiculous, I'll just hire you as a regular intern. And she was 15 or something.
Wow.
And just went from there. I think she went to MIT very briefly, dropped out, realizing that she could, she's ready for the world, and is just kind of prodigious in her field. And that yeah, I think there are lots of examples of that. And the more you see that, the more you're like, well, that's not my field. I may not even know my field. Maybe I need to do the Paul Graham exploration of all possible fields so that I can find my field. But when I do find my field, there's no speed limit. There are better and worse ways of learning this. There are some people who are way more effective than others, and if I can
Yeah.
glean, that process from them, then I can.
Is there a roadmap to get from zero to high school though? Is that a known thing in the homeschooling world? Like these are the books, these are the textbooks you have to use. My loose understanding is you have to adhere to some sort of governmental standards by each grade level and probably take this or some sort of test to prove that you're learning stuff. But is this an also unexplored area? Like, how do you quickly get
Oh
your kids
yeah.
to high school?
This
Yeah.
is maybe another story, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's ridiculous. Like you could absolutely teach high school level everything to, 8 to 10 year olds.
Yeah.
We learn so little in high schools, honestly. It's just like there's very, very little taught, and very little retained. And it's totally possible if you take the right approach. I find that it's ridiculous. And reading is one of those things where, I don't know if we've spoken about this on the podcast.
Not on the podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
But like I'm an advocate of teaching kids to read as young as possible. And like, so my current status with that is my 4-year-old can read more or less whatever she wants, like could pick up the New York Times and read it, not comprehend everything, but could like decode the words. And my 2-year-old is like on the way. And um the the thing that is astonishing for me is that most people are happy with the school standard of let's let this take 4 years. Let's let it be slow and excruciating, and take something which, like, for the kid would have been an exciting skill to acquire,
Yeah.
and instead push it out to the point where it feels like a chore for them. It's like reading, like the learning to read becomes a struggle, a trauma even,
Yeah.
and like this ineffective process stretched way out. And it's just like they're just doing it the wrong way. They're just doing stupid stuff. Like there are schools where, and I even saw this with a tutor who was trying to, like, in front of me, teach a kid. The kid can't read the word, and the tutor is like, "Well, can you guess? Can you look at the picture? What are the, like, surrounding words? What do you think it starts with a B?" There's no recognition that we have a freaking alphabet. Did I say this is a total other thing? That we have an alphabet, that the words are constituted of letters that have sounds that combine together. And that if you learn the sounds of the letters, isn't it ridiculous that they're
Yeah.
just not teaching phonics? And okay, English is imperfect. And if you see an A there, it can be at and and stuff. But we can teach that too. And if you take that approach, like if you take a systematic phonics-based approach for a kid who's ready for it and excited about it, it's a very, very short process.
Yeah.
I
I'm
start.
gonna read your post on this and do this. I think even the word phonics to me in my mind, culture has said, oh, hooked on phonics. This is a sort of thing from the 80s or something, and it doesn't really work.
It's the only, yes, it's the thing that's so obvious that it would work.
Yeah.
And then, like, the thing that the particular book that I used was so effective. It was just like shockingly effective. And I look on the Facebook groups and stuff, and the commentary about that book is like, this is the worst book I've ever seen. If I ever wanted to burn a book, it's this book. It's like, how are we in this situation where the clearly best, most effective thing is misunderstood enough that people would rather subject their kids to 4 or 5 years of traumatic non-learning than literally 3 months to take a kid from not reading at all to independently reading.
Yeah.
It's just it's just like, it's understood. It's solved. This is a solved problem. It's not necessarily easy. Like I think the reason for that particular book that I found it effective when other people haven't is because a lot comes down to the delivery there. And
Yeah.
you need to be like
And what's
reasonably
the name of the
good at
book? Because I've skimmed in it, and it's the thing that struck me too was so much of it is specifically what the parent or teacher is supposed to say, and
Yes.
where you're supposed to put your finger and move
Yes.
your finger. Yeah.
Yeah. So the book is called Teach a Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons.
Yeah.
And it is it's this mode of teaching, or the school of thought called direct instruction, which, if you're interested in pedagogy and you're not familiar with this idea, you really need to look into it. It's basically like, let's not beat about the bush. Let's actually figure out a process for teaching kids what they need to know and show them that. Let's not, like, do games and riddles, and let's not sing a song about arithmetic. Let's just teach them how to do arithmetic.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that from the, like, more progressive education camp is like, well, what about the organic motivation and having them, like, discover arithmetic on their own or whatever? And I'm actually very sympathetic to that as well. But my view is like, well, okay, once they have expressed an interest in this thing, let's not screw around. It's like,
Yeah.
this is the time that they're excited to learn about reading, not 6 months or 12 months from now. It's like they're bringing a book and play reading. They're sitting down next to you and trying to read. Okay, let's do this. Let's grab it. Let's grab this motivation by the horns
I
and do
think
the most direct possible thing.
the time is now for me, because we have a 2-year-old too. She's like 2 and 4 months or something. And here's my thing. I'm like, I need to learn phonics first. I flipped through the first couple of it. I'm like, I don't know any of these alleles and words and all this. I don't even know what the phonics terms are. So is there a period where, like, I should spend the next 2 weeks teaching myself this before I can, like, go to page one?
If I were you, I would, like, I'd buy the book, read the
I haven't.
introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, read the introduction, and that covers what you need. And
Okay.
then maybe for the first couple of lessons, just, like, make sure you read all the instructions ahead of time.
Yeah.
And follow the instructions and kind of trust the process.
Okay.
For that particular book. And I think where people fail with that book is they don't trust the process. They, like, go off script more. And the reason actually direct instruction failed in kind of the broader marketplace of ideas, despite being one of the very few processes that is like demonstrably effective is because teachers did not like following a script. They did not like giving up the idea that they provided this special kind of magic in the classroom, and they shouldn't need a script. And the thing is, they don't need a script, but the script's pretty good. And their magic comes from inspiring the kids, like exciting the kids about this thing, not through the day-to-day process. It's again, it's like Joseph Chan has found good drills for him. Now that those are the best drills for learning those things. Now, if he distills that down and you pick that up in a seminar and you follow that, you're going to do well. It's just like he did the effort of finding the right way to do this.
So now I'm thinking direct instruction, how that relates to logo and turtle learning, where like that seems like the opposite, where
The total opposite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Total opposite.
Yeah, but I'm like I said, I'm sympathetic to that as well, and I think you need that as well. And the reason that logo shines and that environment shines, like the constructivist, the kind of environment, is that you like foster an interest in something and a curiosity about something. Again, the word curiosity coming back to the Paul Graham essay, which leads to the student coming up to you and being like, oh, wow, I saw this exciting thing. If I turn the turtle this time and then this time and then this time, it arrives back to where it started and it's a pentagon or something. Like, you can't not use that opportunity to dive into planar geometry, right? It's like the constructivist people are like, no, don't like tell them anything about this. They need to rediscover everything. But like the whole thing about human civilization, wow, we're really gotten off track here. The whole thing about human civilization is that we don't need to learn everything from scratch every single time. Like, it's a tragedy that so much knowledge is lost from one generation to another. We're still so bad at conveying the
So you're saying you don't want to be a first principles thinker? Because I feel like that's everyone wants to be a first principles. I want to be second principles. First, I'm glad the first were figured out.
No, look, I want to encourage first principles thinking. I want kids to discover things on their own.
Yeah.
But I want to expedite the journey from I've discovered this thing, I'm excited about it, to here's our collective understanding of this thing, which I still encourage you to criticize and interrogate.
Yeah.
But this is what we know. Like, this is what the previous generation came up with. This is the best textbook for that. Here's the best process of teaching that skill. You want to read? Here's how we know best how to read. But look, I mean, it's a kind of sophisticated approach. Like, I really feel like the traditional battle lines of the progressive folk in education and the more like classical or traditional folk in education, it's just the wrong line. It's not about free play versus, drilling stuff. It's like, where does the motivation come from, and then what do you do with it? It's like it cuts across both of those things.
Did direct instruction translate well to computer-based learning? Because I feel like computer-based learning gets so much criticism because it is so, even if it's adaptive, it feels rote and mechanical. Whereas I feel like it's not lauded in the same way that you're saying direct instruction can be truly effective. Whereas sort of just the ethos that I'm getting from ed tech for the last 10 years could have taken this direct instruction approach and it really didn't yield those good results. And you're like, oh, the teachers wanted to go off script. Well, the computer's not going to go off script. Why did that not work out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I mean, this is like, if we can find people from Khan Academy on the sales side, it'd be very interesting to talk about this, because I've had some off the record conversations about what happened with them going into schools, where they've got something that's pretty good. Yeah. And they were trying to get it into schools in a big way, and they got knocked back hard. And we don't think about this as one of the failure modes of online education, but it's like, well, again, it's imperfect, right? Like, a lot of it is just old videos that are delivered, but there are interactive elements. And if this is what you've got, like, it's a lot better than the standard textbooks that the school districts are buying. So why are teachers not using it? Why are teachers not using it? That's an interesting question, and I think it is similar to why direct instruction was rejected by teachers. Getting into a mode where we can see the teachers, like,
let's get Ben Eater on the podcast for for several
Yeah, I
reasons.
mean Ben Eater would be good. I mean, a lot of the engineering product side of Khan Academy would be good, but the fascinating aspect of it is
Sales.
the sales side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Oz. I'm gonna go read this as I put myself to sleep. But this was good. Thank you.
Fun to catch up.
All right, bye.
See you, man.